Stand by. We are rolling. Tom, I'm going to you in 3, 2, 1.
Hi, welcome to Dogs Without Cabins. It is June 16th, 2021. I think this is the 7th installment of Dogs Without Cabins, and you will see neither dogs nor cabins. And were you to see one, you'd have to see one without the other because, in fact, they do not have cabins. I don't want to give much of an introduction, but I'd be remiss in not expressing something that really irks me. We got that final order, you don't need to wear a mask anymore. And everybody who is all sabujat and up in arms, you have to wear masks, don't go near those people, they're evil, they don't believe in science, their beliefs lead them away from science. They're the ones who right now want to continue to wear the damn mask because their belief system changed. What on earth happened to the science? Okay, I'm sure we're going to address that, especially if the dogs do some crash courses in science and faith. But first up, we have Noel Labine, longtime friend, wonderful storyteller from, grew up in northern Minnesota near Andover. And he has 3 books. This is one of them. I'll read you the title, Lessons Learned Through Chaos and Mayhem from Northwest Minnesota. And Mr. Chaos and Mayhem himself, Noel Labine.
Thank you, Tom. I'll try not to disappoint you. The story I'm going to tell today is Clandestine Riverboarding Crossing. This is a story about braving cold weather, crossing from the frozen Red River on a clandestine crossing with an old car to smuggle liquor. Oh no, we're stuck! What are we going to do? We're in the woods and it's dark? Well, I'll get to that part. Prohibition happened in the 1920s, and a number of people in all the northern states bordering Canada got involved in smuggling, including my grandpa's cousin, who spent a winter in jail once for smuggling a case of whiskey. Now, a lot of counties after Prohibition went wet, which meant they could sell liquor, but there was also a lot of counties, including the one I lived in, that only could sell 3.2 beer. So the smuggling continued. Only instead of going into Canada to get their whiskey, a lot of people just had to go to North Dakota. Smuggling demands that you are clandestine, which means secret or hidden, and it demands 2 attributes. First of all, you have to be deceptive, which means you're willing to hide something and lie about it. And the second attribute is you have to practice savoir-faire, which means you have to act and perform like everything's cool, that there's nothing wrong. Keep your calm demeanor. There's one character in this story I have to describe because he's an important character, and it describes some of the people from the early part of the last century who lived up in northwest Minnesota. This character's name was Philip Menard. He was loud and boisterous, and proud of his French Indian heritage. He was a results-orientated, focused kind of guy, but very unorthodox. He was elected to be the Justice of the Peace in my hometown. And a lot of communities back in the 50s and 60s had these elected Justices of the Peace, and then the city council would hire a constable to try to keep the law and order. Well, the state complained that Philip Menard wasn't sending any money to the state. So if he was trying people, he's just doing it on local ordinances so the local city could keep the fines. So when he was accused of not being orthodox, he shot a duck and then fined himself $5 for shooting the duck out of season, and then mailed the $5 into the DNR. That should keep him quiet for a while, he said. Well, one evening we were at a party. There was a bunch of neighbors at a party in the country, and Philip Menard was there. At one point he had too much to drink, and his wife said, we should go home now. There was a little bit of a hustle and bustle, and they were gone. About the same time I decided to leave, so just a couple minutes or 5 minutes after they left, I left. And we both had to take the same back roads to get to the paved road. And along the way there was Philip in the ditch. So I stopped to help him out. In those days, a lot of fellow people carried cables or chains in their cars in case they needed a pull or in case they could help someone else get pulled out. And so I had the equipment, and he was glad to let me get him out of the ditch so he could go on his way home. North Dakota was the closest place to buy booze. There was so much traffic going there to get this whiskey that the sheriff would sit at the bridge in Oslo, which is the first bridge about 20 miles north of Grand Forks. The bridges were about 20 miles apart across the river. And at certain times of the day and at certain days of the week, he knew there was more traffic, and he would pull people over and check their trunks. So we knew that if we were going to go into North Dakota, you wanted to avoid the bridge at Oslo. Well, in the winter time, there was a solution. The brothers Oseski, Joe on the North Dakota side and John on the Minnesota side, were two farmers that lived across the river from each other, and they decided to build ramps. And they built these ramps so they were both sloping the same direction. And in the winter time, you could cross on the ice. You'd get their permission to use their ramps. You go down one ramp, cross on the ice, and go up the other. They were very generous people, and although they were supportive of us, they were concerned that we not get in any trouble. We said, no, we'll be sure to stay out of trouble. Well, I had to talk to somebody. I put all this together that there's a chance that we could go to North Dakota to get some liquor, because I'd heard that Smokies in Ardagh, Minnesota would sell booze to anybody that had the courage to walk up to the bar and ask for it. And I was the bigger one of I was a big enough fellow at the age of 16 that I thought I could get away with it. But I didn't have a car. My dad went, at the time I think I was in trouble for something, and so I couldn't get the car. And so I talked my cousin Ferdinand into being the driver. He got his dad's 1951 Plymouth sedan, and he agreed to drive as long as I was the one that was going to go in and buy the booze. So the plan was underfoot. We had no problem crossing the ramp going into North Dakota. For one thing, the ramp on the Minnesota side was steeper, and it was more gradual on the North Dakota side. So we had no problem going down, crossing the river, and going up the North Dakota side. We finally get to Ardagh, and I walk into Smokey's bar. Now, I was wearing a gray cardigan sweater because I thought it would make me look older. I walk into the bar. I'm a little nervous. I don't know really just what to do. I'd never done this before. It looked like there was a empty spot in the bar. I'll just go over there and wait till he comes and waits on me. And that's what I did. And Smokey came up to me and said, "What do you want?" I said, "Well, I want a 6-pack of Schmidt beer." I started studying a pint of vodka and a pint of VSQ brandy. I was sure a half pint of slow gin. Smokey looked at me like, "You haven't done this before, have you?" He said, "Okay." He goes and gets all these items, sets it on the bar. He said, "I'll be $9.60. So I gave him his cash, put everything in paper bags, and he wasn't in a mood for chatting or asking questions, and I was so grateful. Went out to the car, and we were excited, but we were also very nervous. It was one thing just driving into North Dakota, but going back we were carrying contraband. So we were more anxious about it. But that didn't stop us from opening a beer and having a beer on our ride back to the Red River Crossing. Well, that old 51 Plymouth car didn't work quite as good going back because we had that long gradual slope on the North Dakota side, but it was a steep slope going up on the Minnesota side. And our first attempt up the slope started spinning. We had to back all the way down, across the river, and take another run at it. On the second run, we were going faster, but then we fell off of the main rut, and we went off the side where we were stuck good. Oh no, what are we going to do? We're stuck here in the dark, up in the woods. How are we going to get out? We were a little bit panicking. All of a sudden, the lights showed up. Another car was approaching from the Minnesota side. So I didn't want them to come driving down the ramp because there wasn't room for 2 cars. It was just more or less a trail. So I got out of the car and I quickly walked up to the top. Well, meanwhile, he had seen us, was driving the car, and he had gotten out of his car. And there stood Phillip Menard with his Hudson Bay Point wool coat on. It's a white background coat with stripes of green, red, yellow, and indigo. This was a chance for me to practice my savoir-faire again. "Phillip, we're stuck. Can you help us get out?" "Who's that?" I said, "I'm Noel, Buster's son." "Oh, yeah, I'll help you out." And he backed his car down, and we got out a couple cables, and he pulled us out. And that's how we escaped the tentacles of the law and had a successful clandestine border crossing, booze and all. It isn't enough that you have clandestine means, but you notice how we practice savoir-faire in there? That's an important part of smuggling. And of course, it's always good to help someone in trouble. You never know when the favor might be returned. Thank you.
Thanks, Noel. Have you given up your smuggling career?
I'm not saying.
If you Google Noel Labine, you'll find his website and different entries and opportunity to see him perform with his musician friends, which he does quite a bit. Oh, we got a big surprise now. As perilous as it might seem, we have the unknown poet. And the unknown poet, well, as listed officially in Wikipedia, once an immortal, our hero was cast down from the heavens for the crime of writing the worst poems ever. So the rest of you can give up trying. This is the second of a set of lyrical haiku offerings meant to propel him back to the stratosphere. 1 second, please, unknown poet. You know, the unknown poet locally isn't a fixture in the community and not even a necessary cog or an educator or a career coach or whatever it is you declare yourself to be once you retire. The unknown poet is just relentlessly awful. Next up, the unknown poet.
Is it safe? I guess I don't have to word it. I don't have ears. I am the unknown poet, poetry immortal, trying to ascend back into the heavens. Tonight, I have this special offering for you. Revelations, Part 2. Revelation and revolution are quite close. I tell of end times, the nitty-gritty. You all gonna die someday. Now that's out of the way. 'Twas an asteroid or mutual destruction or shambling zombies did in our planet. Super nasty cold virus or a giant duck ate us. Each a point of view and descent into darkness. Cheer up, it could be worse. Revelation. I saw a dark giant shadow rise out of the murk. Before him, people, all who confused church with state, rose into the sky. I walked past a bar. Bunch of them had left their beer, so I helped myself. Filled my pockets with 2 baskets of onion rings and waddled outside. At the Capitol, all who confused faith with bully rose into the sky. Gays got themselves hitched. School funding fully restored. Women were equal. Fox Network broadcast real news. Target headquarters donated to AIDS research instead of Bachman. On the nation's roads, fuming goofs flew through sun roofs, late for a date with the sky. Revolution, Earth, belongs to the meek, not jerks. We got thrown the keys. Wearing overalls, the beast scoured the planet clean. I offered him an onion ring. Numbers 666 riding above his eyebrows, the mark of the beast, the devil's area code. I made Rush Limbaugh fall silent. Glenn Beck ran screaming. Well, I'm badass too. Same marks on my forehead. That's why I wear the mask. My brother, he cried, I have searched for centuries for you, poet. You say that like it's a dirty word, I replied, and we both locked arms and destroyed the world of tyranny and hatred. The end. Poem 2. Weed Eater. I am a bad poet. The dandelion of the bright green yard. Garish, persistent, always inappropriate, difficult to kill. The godhead of all who've ever been rejected. The voice of the crunched white wad at the bottom of the circular file. Great poems and bad poems are really one and the same. The words in different order. Let poems be like seeds borne aloft by a warm wind to find soft touchdown on your neighbor's lawn. Poem 3. Janitorial. Waxing the hallway. Whistling via condillos. 2 INS men stuffed me in a van, sent me back to Mexico. Problem is, I'm Japanese. It took me 2 months to get back. How are you, my pet? My Bernie smiles. The clouds part. The sun dives for cover. How am I doing for time? More?
Unknown.
More? Okay. Love song of the 1978 Huffy 3-speed. I am your fine bike. Your love chained me to a pole like Prometheus in raw November. And you forgot me. It is now March. My frost-rusted chain a warped orange smile. Only handlebars stick out of the concrete of snow and gray ice. Someone swipe my seat. Snowplows have altered my shape. Still, I wait for you. One morning in May, the leaden snow turns me loose. I am now peppered with rust. I will be your ride, but you'll have to buy me a new seat first. Here's a little different one, Crow Haikus. Haiku number 1. In my next life, I will be a black bear. I know I will have to shit in the woods. I'm okay with that. Crow Haiku 2, very crow specific. Pecking holes in bags. Pecking holes in garbage bags. Big holes in white bags. Crow Haiku 3. I am a black crow. I write with blue sky pen flourished by spread wing. I am window literate. I never fly into them. Now you'll notice that. There is a difference. There is sky and there is glass that resembles sky. All crows see past things and reject appearances. I am your proud crow. Thank you very much. I'm late for my bus. Oh no, oh no, oh no. Up, and away.
All right. Whoa, the mysterious unknown poet. Well, that's always something. Unknown poet, do you have a website? I guess we can't find it. We just search we would search the unknown together. Next is Sue Searing, who has done just about every storytelling venue you can imagine, has won all kinds of championships. I'm sorry, I'm not really good at official bios, but was, part of Kieran's and Slams and Stork and Moth, a board member of Story Arts in Minnesota, and genuinely one of the most wonderful and smart storytellers in town, Sue Searing.
Yay!
What's in a name? 10 fragments that want to be a story and one folktale. 1. I've been thinking about names of people, ever since my friend Michael Goldberg called me up and asked, "You got anything for me?" Michael produces Stay Human, a weekly radio show on Northern Community Radio, and he was putting together a show about names. So I told him about my mother's parents, who got introduced to each other on a lark by someone who thought it would be funny to bring together Edith Meek, M-E-E-K, and John Meeks, M-E-E-K-S. And they fell in love, and they got married, and they propagated and produced children and grandchildren who were forever doomed to try to figure out which relatives had an S on the end of their name and which didn't. Now, my grandma had one favorite Bible verse: "The meek shall inherit the earth," which left me out because her one daughter, my mother, took her husband's last name when she married, and that was Searing, which, like meek, is an adjective, but not such a virtuous one. 2. When you're a kid and you discover that your name is also a bona fide word, of course you can't resist looking it up in the dictionary. Well, maybe you could, but I couldn't. Searing, adjective, very hot and intense. Examples of searing used in a sentence: the race took place in the searing heat. Gary felt a searing pain in his leg. The undersecretary looked chastened as he listened to the congressman's searing rebuke. When her searing body touched his control began to slip. Oh, well, lots of people have adjectives that are last names that are adjectives: Brown, Stout, Sharp, Wilder, Young. I once had a dentist whose last name was Payne. Really. 3. So whether you like your last surname or not, it does have a certain solidity and staying power. Unless you've created a stage name or a pseudonym or a criminal alias, most of us live out our lives with the surname that we received at birth or took at marriage. It's our last name. It grounds us in our collective past and future. But first names, those are trickier. Now, I'm not a parent, and I don't envy parents who have to pick names for their offspring. It's a heavy responsibility. Do you name them after a favorite aunt or that teacher who inspired you back in 3rd grade? Are you obliged to use a name that's been handed down in your spouse's family from generation to generation? Will the first name work aesthetically with the last name? Will it flow prettily and easily from the tongue? Can you assure that the name you bestow them with won't prompt the creation of embarrassing nicknames by your child's peers? Do you prefer a creative spelling to the traditional one? There's a website called bestlittlebaby.com, and it suggests more than a dozen alternative spellings for Antoine and Kristen. And of course, names go in and out of fashion. The top 10 female names in 1950, when I was born, according to the Social Security Administration: Mary, Linda, Patricia, Susan, Deborah, Barbara, Deborah, different spelling, Karen, Nancy, and Donna. The top 10 female names last year: Olivia, Emma, Ava, Charlotte, Sophia, Amelia, Isabella, Mia, Evelyn, and Harper. 4. Folklorists and anthropologists have always been fascinated by customs and superstitions related to naming. Reports from the field date back to the 19th century, and I'm not sure they're all credible. If I were an indigenous person being quizzed about how my people choose names for babies, I might find those questions silly or intrusive, and I might tell them any old crazy thing just to end the conversation. But maybe it's true that the Maori people prepare long lists of potential names, which they then recite aloud next to the cradle until the newborn sneezes and thereby chooses its own name. And maybe German families really did light candles, each one labeled with the name of a saint, and the candle that burned the longest determined the baby's name. Oh, there are names that are associated with bad luck or early death, and other names that work like good luck charms to ensure a happy future and protect from disease. Your child's initials should spell a word or they shouldn't spell a word, depending on which subculture and language group you belong to. 5. Given the importance of names, it's surprising to me that so many folk and fairy tales have no names for the characters. A story goes on for pages and pages, but the hero is never identified beyond there once was a girl, or once upon a time a woodcutter went into the woods. And outside of creation myths, there are very few traditional stories where the plots involve acts of naming. But here is one from Ethiopia. There was a man whose wife became pregnant for the first time. "Oh, wonderful," he said. "What's it going to be? What are you going to have?" "I don't know," she said. "You don't know?" Well, no, I don't know." "Can it be a surprise?" "Oh, no," he said, "I want to know." "Well, I'll go to the wise woman. She'll know what you're going to have." And so he went to the wise woman and knocked on her hut and explained the problem and gave her a gold coin. She took 3 old yellowed bones and she tossed them to the ground. "Ah," she said when she looked at how they fell. He looked down. "Ah," he said. She scooped up those bones and she tossed them again. "Oh. Oh," he went. A third time she picked them up, she shook them, she muttered a few words at them, she threw them down. "Oh," she said, "of course." "Oh," he said, "of course?" "Well," she said, "it's obvious. The bones have made it clear. Your wife is going to have a baby." "Oh," he said, "a baby? Oh, wonderful." And he ran right home to tell her. And she was happy too, and a couple of months later, sure enough, a healthy, bouncing baby was born to them. But now they had another problem. It was time for the christening, and they didn't know the baby's name. "Well, don't you know it?" said the husband. "Well, no, I don't," she said. "Don't you know it?" "No, I don't," he said. "I know. I'll go to that wise woman." So back he went and gave her another gold coin, and she took out the bones and she tossed them down. "Oh," she said. He looked at her and looked at the bones. "Ah," he said. She scooped them up and tossed them again. "Oh, oh. Oh, oh," he said. And a third time she threw down the bones after whispering a few words. "Ah," she said, "yes, of course." "Oh," he said, "yes, yes, of course. What is the name?" "Come clear," she said. "Hold out your hands, and I'll whisper the name into them." So she bent down. "The baby's name is psh, 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 psh. Now quick," she said, "clasp it and hold it tight till you get home and give it to the baby." "Oh, thank you," he said, and he went on home. "My baby's got a name now, my baby's got a name." Well, as he was on the road going home, he went by a farm where some of his friends were out there threshing wheat. And they were, with their pitchforks, throwing it up in the air, and the straw and the chaff was falling down. And they saw him coming by with his hands clasped, and they said, "What have you got there?" "Oh," he said, "it's my baby's name." But as he turned to talk to them, he slipped on some straw, and down he went. His hands came apart. "Oh, no," he said, "I lost it. I dropped it. My baby's name. Quick, come, help me find it." The farmers came running. "Well, what's it look like?" they said. "Oh, I don't know," he said. "I never saw it." They were all down on the ground, sifting through the straw and the chaff, trying to find that name, when a woman came walking down the road and said, "What are you doing?" So the man explained that they were looking for the lost name. "It's simply ridiculous," she said, and kept on walking. He jumped up, thank you," and he ran on home. His wife said, "Do you have the name for our baby?" Yes," he said, "I lost it, and we couldn't find it, but that woman came along and told me the baby's name is ridiculous." And so that child was known for the rest of its life. 6. Well, I was the first child born to Sam and Dorothy Jean Searing, and they called me Susan. And later they would claim that they had no idea whatsoever that Susan would be one of the most popular girls' names in the baby boom. And as I moved up through the grades in a mass of Sues and Susans and Susies, I wished that I'd had a name that was more special. When I got old enough to explore the biography section of the school library, I discovered Susan B. Anthony and told people that I was named after her. She was a remarkable woman, my dad said, but we didn't name you after her. Well, who did you name me after? I asked. Well, no one, Mom said. We just like the name Susan. It's a nice old-fashioned name, and, well, we liked it. So, I said, if I'm not named after anyone else, well, why can't I be named after Susan B. Anthony? Because I had the idea that everyone had to be named after someone, and if my parents had failed in this regard, I could rectify their mistake. But they said it didn't work that way. 7. Well, many people do find ways to shape their first names to their liking. My middle name is Ellis. Not Alice like in Wonderland, but Ellis like the island. When I joined a small group, a pre-existing group of adventurous women who go on canoeing and camping trips together, it already included a Sue. So I became Ellie. And you know, I feel different, like a better person when I'm living in the wilderness. So it feels right to have a different name. Through hikers of the Appalachian Trail assume or are given a trail name along the way. And in many cultures, initiation rites and coming-of-age ceremonies involve receiving a new name, and sometimes it remains a closely guarded secret because that true name might have the power of magical protection. And nowadays, many people choose online aliases, names as shields to hide behind as they lob opinions and insults and vulnerable art out into cyberspace. 8. The more I read about names and naming, the more I recalled from my own life and the more I appreciate the deep and complicated tapestries of our names and identities and cultural roots. There is a power in names that, like stories, tie people and communities together. Say his name, George Floyd. It's a phrase that echoes from makeshift stages and street corners, in call and response from the mouths of marchers, from the lips of poets and preachers. Say his name. Read his name, all of their names, painted on the street at 38th and Chicago, lettered on the cardboard replicas of gravestones in the nearby park, a pop-up imaginary cemetery for the Black victims of murderous police from all across our wounded country. I walk down those rows in silence as my wife quietly whispers each and every name. And I know that every one of them was someone's baby. Someone gave them that name. 9. An artist and friend of mine, B. Nettles, makes poetry from the names on gravestones. She photographs them, because so many names are actual words, and prints them and cuts them and pastes them together into long lines, and then photographs the pages and handfolds and sews them into books. They are beautiful and strange, the names of the living, of the dead, living again in free verse. In a recent work, B chronicled the COVID pandemic, a month-by-month record of news about the disease and the world's reactions, and how fitting that the story is told entirely through the names of those long buried and gone. 10. If you ever need an icebreaker to help a group of strangers get acquainted, here's one that works well. Pair people up and make them tell each other the story of their names. They might protest that their name doesn't have a story, but believe me, it does.
Thank you, Sue. I knew a guy in Georgia whose name was Ket, K-E-T, and I asked him, what kind of name's that? And he said, it's short for a little kettle. And I asked him, what kind of name is that? And he said, my older brother's name was Otto. Otto sounds like otter. Otters swim in water. You put water in the kettle, and because I'm his little brother, they call me Little Kettle. My chosen name for the past 40 years has been Music Master. I write and create art and have used that name in shows around the world of very abstract and avant-garde alternative male art, visual poetry. And oddly, only when I came to Minnesota were people insistent that I fess up a real name, which I never really quite understood. The name I pick is Music Master. Hey, do we have a minute, Hamill, to do a poem or no?
Yeah, a short one.
Well, okay, well, I'll get rid of the first 30 pages. I do have a short poem. I'll read a couple of very short things. Okay, so here's the idea. There's a new yoga instructor for the 9 a.m. flex and stretch class at the Y, but the Y doesn't know that he used to be a drill instructor. Sounds like an unknown poet type of piece, doesn't it? Here's the sketch. The Church of Satan wants to lighten up its image and recruit new members because they've sacrificed most of their old members, so they recruit these kids straight out of college, and we see them knocking around ideas in a fire pit where Satan's head is spinning around in the middle. And okay, this next one, final one, is maybe just a sight gag. A teenager is wearing a t-shirt that says, "My parents went to Intercourse, Pennsylvania, and all I got was me." Say whatever you want. Say anything at all. Stupid or brilliant or anchored in lies. Be clever or boring. Use dirty words, though you don't need hell when heck will do. And while you can complain about the war, it is because of that very war you slander that you have the right to say anything at all. You can talk about sports, penguins, cheerleaders, hunting recipes, movies, nuns, zombie cheerleaders, hunting penguins, even grisly murders and solar panels. According to myspeakingass.com, there are nearly 66 sextillion topics you can talk about with ever really saying anything at all. So raise up your hands to the moon and say whatever you want to break the silence. Small talk, back talk, booze talk, smack talk, but no inflammatory words, hate words, gray words, hurtful words, incendiary words, insinuating words, ambiguous words, confusing words, too many anti-this, anti-that kind of words, anything Arabic sounding or any word with one of those little squiggles over a letter, and no big words, damn it. You can say whatever you want, anything at all, just don't challenge authority, angrily, loudly, threateningly, publicly, jokingly, directly, or privately. Even muttering, "We are idiots," while getting TSA'd at the airport is like screaming fire on a burning planet. When they say to you to just, hey, say what you want to say, you better be especially damn careful that you don't. Remember, there are many, many rules, but luckily, there are even more ways to break them. Hey, thanks for watching Dogs Without Cabins. Next episode will be a benefit so the dogs can get a cabin. Take care, be safe. Thanks again. Oh, and thank you, Hamill, Griffin-Cassidy, the studio audience, Vanessa, the unknown poet, and Noel and Sue. I appreciate you greatly. So what was that, 36 minutes?
Yeah, something.
So what's that? There's a limit?